Hello, this is a follow-up video to the previous one we had when we assessed the piano when it first came into stock. Since then, it's been rented out for about 10 months to some piano teachers who've now decided to buy a bigger piano that they could fit in, which is 6'6" long, a Bechstein. But this Bluthner, they really enjoyed while they had it. I know the piano quite well because I also went to tune it in their house in Oxford. So it's come back into stock. I'm just videoing to this piano stool, which matches pretty well. It's a top quality John Austin English piano stool with a leather brown top. Now the casework on the piano itself is definitely a candidate for repolishing. There's nothing desperately wrong with it, but as you can see, as we get close to it, you can see that it is ready for repolishing, shall we say that. I'm going to try and show up all the bits that are worst on it. So the colour is nice. We repolish these very often. It's a piano we really love repolishing because they do come out well. Here's the top of the fall. You can see the front edge there. I think we probably improve that a bit without repolishing fully, if you didn't want to pay the expense, because repolishing takes 70 hours and 30 coats of French polish. We like to do it in a traditional way. This is a Steinway upright that we've finished polishing, and it's in the polishing room at the moment, and all ready to go. So we've deliberately chosen the colour that brings out the best contrast in the grain. And here is another piano that's been repolished. This is a Gauss and Kalman. The client has asked for a darker colour, so it doesn't quite show so much contrast in the grain, but it's actually more close to the original colour. Here's a Gretchen Steinberg upright ready for polishing, one of our favourite makes of piano. So back to the Bluthner, we can see a slight contrast here as the lid's been kept back. We can see the contrast on the lid there, where it's faded more where it's been exposed and less. This is more the original colour, less where it's obviously been folded back. And on the sides of the piano, if we look at the sides, it's all pretty even. There's not any undue fading. But as I say, we'd love to repolish this piano, but it is obviously adds a lot to the price if you do that. Here you can see the scratches on the side of the music desk and on the music desk itself. And finally, going around the back of the piano, so it's not unevenly faded, except for the top where there's this fade line on it. But definitely a candidate, you can see around the side there, candidate for repolishing. Though we could make it good, we can certainly improve it if we have a day's work on trying to improve the polish. Now, in the previous video I talked a lot about regulation, and just to show that we've regulated the key dip, so just under 11 millimeters we set it at. And hammer blow we've set at 47 millimeters. There's the gauge for measuring 47 millimeters, and you can see it's just not quite touching. I think this gauge is slightly less than 47 millimeters actually, but it feels just right now, the touch. I've got to mention, we didn't attend to these chips which were mentioned in the previous video. They're really small chips, and obviously the musician didn't want that done, but we could do that. Having said that, they're such small chips, and I think we can disguise them pretty well, though, or fill them pretty invisibly. Another thing which is important I didn't mention on the other video is that actually the right hand pedal is worn through here. We've talked about that before. So the piano's had, the sustain pedals had a lot of wear, but some sustain pedals wear through, as we talked about Bechstein. Bluthner occasionally wears through like that too, and some makes don't seem to wear through at all. There's not really any problem, but cosmetically it's hard to get that perfect, but I'm sure we can fill it and improve it. Sorry I got out of order a bit here, but the hammer height then is adjusted by these capstans here. You turn them to the right and the hammer gets higher. And then the set-off we mentioned as well, that needed sorting out. So the set-off, this is the set-off button, and that needs turning that way in order for the piano to set off later. Better put it back to where it was before, otherwise it will be out. There we are. Let's have a look at the set-off. So the set-off is how high will the hammer get before it, without being played, before it hits the string. And you want it as close as possible. That's as close as we felt we could get it for safety. That's middle C. And then it drops back, the drop screw there, a bit lower than the set-off. Let's look at C and B put together. So there we are, the drop screw is the same, and the set-off is the same. Now just briefly, remember that previously this hammer was resting on the rail. Now we've adjusted the hammer height considerably. We could have changed the roller, but it wasn't that necessary really. We want to dry lubricate the roller. I've noticed that it would have improved with that, as well as the wet lubricant, as well as the lubricant here, which is put on wet. It's graphite, like pencil lead, but it's put in solution, and then you dry lubricant on here, and I think we need that just to finish it off. But these centre pins are tight. Hammers have been refaced, and now the tone is really as beautiful as it was in the original piano, I think. Now just finally, we talked many times about the importance of tuning pins being tight, which makes us decide whether we're going to fully restore or we're going to recondition. In this case, tuning pins are tight, though if you have underfloor heating, and in the very long term, let's say 30 years time, you might want to change the tuning pins, in which case we change the block under here. Now that's standard work, and on a Bluthner is relatively easy to do. So that's work that could be done. The strings are sounding very, very good. And we mentioned before that if you change this manufacturer specifications, you lose some of the original Bluthner. Is that on the bass strings here, because it's such a short piano, it's not incredibly resonant, obviously. The length of the string, it's not incredibly deep tone down there, but the piano's played mostly around here, of course, and the octaves down here are what matters. That's the important thing, and they do sound very, very good. For a small grand, as we said before, there isn't a better one really. There are similarly good ones perhaps, but Bluthner is certainly one of our favourites. There's a very sweet tone and round and very even tone this piano has. And the soundboard is in perfect condition too. Now, as I mentioned before, cracks in the soundboard just indicate drying out and don't necessarily alter the tone of the piano, but there are no cracks in this soundboard anyway, so that's encouraging. So that's another brief look at this Bluthner Star 4 1937, which has just come back in from having been hired out for 10 months to piano teachers, who then decided to buy a much longer piano, a Bechstein Model 5, which is wonderful. But so is this really, for the size of the piano. And the action is extremely responsive. The geometry of these actions on these Bluthners is wonderful. Now down the bass end, they're not powerful obviously, but it's only a 5-foot piano, so that's what you expect really. Thank you very much for listening.